my gun. Fortunately, I don't have much occasion to use it. But that's it. I've had shooting lessons. I know how it works.
Many people reacted to my interview with Adrian Vos, who was brutally attacked on his farm in March this year. And the social media activist Tertia Meiberg Engelbrecht that I posted yesterday. If you've not seen the interview, I'll place a link below in the description box of this video. What struck me most was that many people, or the many people who thanked us for telling Vos's story, the story of farm murders, the story of crime in South Africa, this all, of course, on the back of the Ramaphosa-Donald Trump meeting in the White House earlier this week. Thank you for telling the world, you wrote. Thank you for daring to talk about farm murders. South Africa, some say, is like a war zone. We are prisoners in our homes. The call for help is overwhelming. What surprised me most is that you are telling me that the subject of farm murders, the unspeakable violence in the country, is not, as one would expect, on the front pages of every single newspaper in South Africa on a daily basis. People thank me for telling your story, our story, my story. Because though I live in Amsterdam, I'm an Afrikaner like many of you. And no, I'm not naive. No, I know that these stories are largely not being told. That they are in many instances swept under the carpet, and that the mainstream media's narrative is to focus on the survival of South Africa's brittle multicultural democracy. Adrian Vos's story is not new. It's not news. It has not been news for many years. I want to share with you something out of my personal life, something akin to a home movie that I dug out of my personal archives. A little film clip shot in 2002, 23 years ago, during a private visit to South Africa. What Donald Trump is telling the world is not a news story. It's been your story, my story, our story, for at least the last 2 decades. I mean, everybody's house is behind some kind of a barbed wire, a wall, a fence. Every single house has got literally these prison bars on it. I mean, people are really living in a kind of a bridge. Look at these wires here. It's incredible. Look at this house here. I mean, I don't care whether people say these are rich people or poor people. These are just very ordinary people that are living here. It's amazing. Spikes everywhere. Look at the fencing over there. What's going on? Is there something happening here, or what are they doing here now? I think they just jumped through.
Car just died, so now luckily we've got contacts in the penalty yard, which makes me very nervous. Hello, my fingers go up and down. It's fine.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Lovely to see you.
Just on a blurry camera.
Well, no, we just sort of take some pictures later. We just drove through the neighborhood and had a look at all the fencing around this house.
Isn't it incredible?
It's unbelievable.
I was going to say to you, was drive around and look at the fence. Every house, they've either got the fence up already or there's somebody busy putting it up.
Yeah, but I mean,
It's
if you go around the corner, there's just like masses of barbed wire around there.
All you see is razor wire.
What have you got here in terms of safety and security?
Yeah, we've got a 3-foot wall and then put up to 6.5 feet with palisade fence.
And those are sharp pointers.
They're sharp pointers. Security people say if the alarm goes off at night, they don't know how they'll get over the gate.
So you've got that. You've got an alarm.
We've got an alarm, we've got a burglar door, a burglar gate, back and front. Then we've got one at the end of the passage, separating the lounge
So you've got
from
actually
the bedroom.
inside the house, you actually
Inside the
have
house, we
another...
have another security gate.
So in other words, at night time when you go to bed, you lock yourself
We
in
lock
a
ourselves
corner
into
of
the
your
bedroom,
house.
into the bedroom area.
You lock yourself into your
That's
bedroom.
right. We lock ourselves into the passageway that the 3 bedrooms are off,
1301.
so that we can walk between the 3 bedrooms. But to get into the rest of the house, we have to unlock the gate.
And you still have a gun with you as well?
Yes, I've got a gun. I've got a 3.8. And Errol's also got a gun. I think Errol's is a 4.5. I'm not sure.
And is your gun within reach when you go to bed? Is it?
Unfortunately, no. But because we've got the security gate and all the alarms and security doors, but the guns are accessible. They're kept in the safe.
Is this paranoia or is it reality?
It's reality, unfortunately. We've already had 7 break-ins here. The last one, they didn't get into the house. But because we leave the windows partly open for the cats, I think they thought there was no alarm.
And my cameraman is your son, and he left South Africa 18 years ago. You cried when he left. He told me the other day.
I'm crying a little bit now because I'm a little bit emotional.
I appreciate
about
that.
the fact that you're back. And I
Do you want him to come back into this country or not?
I would love him to come back, but it would be a tragedy. Right at the moment, I have an English birth certificate. And right at the moment, my grandchildren are trying to get ancestral visas on the strength of my British birth certificate to be able to immigrate. And I say they go with my blessing.
Now, if your son says to you today, I'd like to come back to South Africa and live here, what would you say to
I
him?
would say you're making a terrible mistake. Making a terrible, terrible mistake. I'm an old lady, Johanna. I'm 74. I can't move anywhere. The rest of my family are all here. I'm trying to persuade Geraldine, my other daughter, to go. If I could do it, I would like to see my whole family out of South Africa. But unfortunately, I mean, what do you do at 54? Go to a strange country and look for another job? Because that's Renee and Errol's age, so they're in their 50s. Otherwise, I would say, please go.
But that security gate will never be open.
A security gate is never left open. You know, whether we're home or whether we're not home, it's always closed.
Will you show us the other door as well? I'd like to see what you're talking
Yes.
about. So inside your house,
This gate,
so your bedroom is?
all 3 of the bedrooms are back there. So we all sleep back there.
So at night time you also close
We
this?
close this gate as well. And then through here, we have another security.
And then there's another security gate
Another
through here.
security gate here, which is kept locked.
Yeah. And your gun, Eileen?
My gun is in the gun safe.
In the gun safe. Would you mind showing us the gun?
No, we can do that. Here, with another about 8 or 12 inches of palisade fencing on the top of it. All the way around.
Does it make you feel safe?
Well, I don't know. People get robbed even with palisade fencing, with alarms. I mean, friends of ours down the road a couple of weeks ago, I looked out of the dog barked out on the veranda, and I looked to see who was arriving, so I could open the gate, and there was a suitcase thrown over the back wall, the front wall. So I phoned our security people. They came. When they opened the suitcase, it had a video machine in it. They discovered a house just down the road had been burgled. These people have been cleaned out. And my friend's son happens to be a security agent. This is my gun. Fortunately, I don't have much occasion to use it. But that's it. I've had shooting lessons. I know how it works. And I had a burglary a few years ago when I was on my own. I was on my own and I had a burglary. And I was so paranoid for about 3 weeks after it that I carried the gun with me wherever I went. When I was working in the kitchen, the gun was on the table next to me. Our last break-in here, they actually broke the security door off the front and broke down the front door. And we woke up there. As soon as the door opened, the alarm went off. And Errol rushed out. And they'd actually broken down the front door. We had to replace the whole front door. If at any stage Renee and Errol are both away, and I'm here on my own, then I have the gun out all the time.
First of all, I want to say thank you for watching my video. If you can stick to the next end, you know, I'm gonna go into other details about how this has been changing over the years and how we really not seeing the whole thing about this South African situation, how it really plays a role in our lives. I'm still getting better at making videos. I'm trying to be a lot more smoother because I'm a little nervous on the camera, but I really appreciate you for checking out my shit. Thank you.
And what's left of the Christian West, we are in grave danger as a nation. And Alex joins us now. Alex, did I get that quote correct? We are in grave danger as a nation?
Absolutely. It's great to see you both. Thank you for having me. And what's happening in South Africa is the model. It is the template that they plan to use on us. In fact, right now it's targeting the Afrikaner. The Afrikaners call us the Amerikaners. Our histories are intimately intertwined. In fact, the Afrikaner people are the closest cousins that Americans have anywhere in the world. They came from the same places, generally held the same cultural and religious values. And, I think it's a mistake to racialize it like some in the media are trying to do. They're trying to paint Donald Trump as a racist for talking about this. I don't think it's that the communists and the globalists and the deep staters hate these people because they have lighter skin, but they have several other strikes against them, right? For one, they're mostly Christian. And as we know, Christianity is not compatible with communism, with totalitarianism, with globalism, etc. They also are farmers. They're producing food. In fact, these are some of the most productive farmers on the face of the earth that have ever lived on the face of the earth. And if you want to control people, the totalitarians have understood for a long time, control their food and control their energy. Well, what we're watching in South Africa, again, is a microcosm of what they plan for the world. And I'll try to explain it quickly. South Africa is not a real nation, right? And that's the first thing that people need to understand. There is no nation called South Africa. South Africa is a landmass. It's a region of the world that has a lot of different nations in it. The Afrikaner nation is one of those nations. It is a true nation in the truest sense. It's got a shared culture, shared language, shared history, shared religious tradition, kind of Calvinist, Reformed Christianity. And then there are other nations down there that share the same space. The Zulu nation, which many times throughout South African history has been allied with the Afrikaner nation. The Xhosa nation of Nelson Mandela, the Venda. A lot of those nations are now independent. During apartheid, they tried to give them self-government. The Venda, the Tswana in Botswana, the Swazi in Swaziland. But what they've done in South Africa is they've amalgamated all of these historically very different nations under one unitary totalitarian regime. And that's what they're now trying to do at the global level. If you listen to the former Secretary General describe the UN General Assembly as the Parliament of Humanity, if you look at the G77 plus China and the BRICS describing the UN General Assembly as an emblem of global sovereignty, it doesn't take a lot of dot connecting to realize Americans have one vote in the UN General Assembly. What will happen if 193 other governments decide they want our land, they want our farms, they want our lives, they want our guns, they want our liberties? Well, the same exact thing that's happening to the Afrikaner right now. So, folks, it's not just some isolated conflict in a faraway land. It is the template. When you listen to Barack Obama, he actually says he was inspired to get into politics by South Africa. That was his first political action. The same plan, even the same tactics that they're using right now against the Afrikaners in South Africa are going to be deployed, and in many cases already are being deployed against Americans today.
What are those tactics specifically? Can you go more in depth about that?
There's a lot of them, right? And we could probably spend 2 weeks talking about it. But one of the very obvious ones is filling the country with foreigners, right? During the apartheid government, and nobody wants to defend apartheid, obviously, but during apartheid, you had millions of black Africans immigrating into South Africa, legally and illegally, right? They were flooding into the country. A lot of them were being sent by hostile governments. If you look at what was happening with the Afrikaners, the entire world allied against them. The Soviet Union, the communist regimes in Cuba, in Angola, in Mozambique, Libya, all over the world. And then the deep state in the United States, the David Rockefellers, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Henry Kissingers of the world, all allied against this tiny little group. And what they were doing was they were flooding that country with immigrants and teaching all these immigrants that this is a racist society. It needs to be absolutely dismantled and crushed. That's what they were teaching the children in the schools. Same exact thing happening in America. Now, again, I want to emphasize this. The issue is never the issue with the communists. That's what they used to say back in the 70s. The issue is always the revolution. So they'll make it about race. They'll make it about climate change. They'll make it about whatever they think will be likely to come up with public support. But just to illustrate how phony the racial pretext is, The South African Communist Party, which has controlled the African National Congress for many, many decades. I mean, it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the South African Communist Party, which itself was a wholly owned subsidiary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Their original slogan when they became active in Southern Africa, by the way, it was the first Communist Party started outside of the Soviet Union by the Soviets, was "Whites of South Africa unite to keep South Africa white." Right? So when they realized that that horse probably wasn't going to run very well, they jumped onto the black liberation struggle as the pretext, but the revolution was the same. Now look at what they're doing to us in the United States. Exactly the same process, exactly the same rhetoric, exactly the same effort to stir up civil unrest and ultimately violence, and the same exact narrative, right? And this isn't just being taught to American children. This is being taught to people around the world in the fake media. America is being demonized. Calls for global governance are accelerating. So take what happened in South Africa, merging all these very different nations under one unitary totalitarian regime. Move that up to the international level, where Americans are one solitary nation, all unified under this unitary regime, and you see the same process. And I would encourage people to go read something I wrote. You can find it on my website. I originally wrote it for a book about Barack Obama. On my website, libertysentinel.org, it's called To Understand Obama, You Must Understand South Africa's Communist Revolution. What I go through and do there is quote Barack Obama on all of these issues, and you will see very clearly how all of this is what inspired him to get involved. He says it himself, right? You see the key players involved intersecting with Barack Obama. So the same revolution that is taking place in South Africa now is going global. And Americans, you are the last thing standing in the way.
No, there's so much ignorance when people are sort of boiling this down to, is there a genocide or isn't there? Is it just unsafe for white people? Should they go back, right? CNN saying, well, they can go back. They don't say that about the Zulus, who are not native to South Africa and did, in fact, colonize other black people. So, but what do you say to this idea that it is unsafe across the board in South Africa? So why did the Trump administration only single out the whites to save them, so to speak, offer them safety? Is there anybody speaking for the blacks who are also victims of violence?
Yeah, well, there's a very serious element of truth in the fact that crime is out of control in South Africa, right? Even when I lived there 20 years ago, it was a disaster. Today, it is one of the most violent, murderous societies on the face of the earth, which is what tends to happen when you amalgamate a bunch of different nations together under a communist, unitary, corrupt, racist regime. That's to be expected. But we need to be very clear here, right? When they talk about normal crime and normal murders, and this was, again, a problem when I lived there 20 years ago, they're talking about somebody pulls up next to you at a street light and blows your brains out and steals your car. What's happening with these Afrikaners is something totally, totally different. Okay. And again, I didn't start speaking out about this publicly until 2012. I would highly recommend people go back and read it. It was a cover story that I did for the New American Magazine called Genocide and Communism Threaten South Africa. Everything that's happening today was happening back then. And the straw that broke the camel's back for me, where I said, you know what, I don't care what people say, I don't care what people think, somebody has to speak out about this, was a fact-finding mission that Dr. Gregory Stanton had made to South Africa back in 2012. Now, he was an anti-apartheid activist, kind of on the left, right? I mean, I don't know how he would describe himself, but he certainly strikes me as more of a liberal. He went down there and looked at this, looked at the evidence and said, wow, South Africa is at stage 6 out of 8 on the genocide scale. He had developed a genocide scale. He's changed it somewhat. But in 2012, he said the Afrikaners are now on the verge of being exterminated. Stage 6 was the planning and preparation for the slaughter. Stage 7 was the slaughter itself. Stage 8 was denial after the fact. So that was the genocide scale. He said Afrikaners are now at stage 6. And the reason why he said that was very obvious. The president of the country, Jacob Zuma, the polygamist pagan leader of the ANC and president of the Republic of South Africa, was going on TV, was standing in stadiums singing, "Bring me my machine gun, we're going to shoot all the Boers. My cabinet's going to help me shoot all the Boers." You had Jacob Zuma, Julius Malema, who Trump showed a few videos of him in the Oval Office the other day. At the time, he was the leader of the youth wing of the African National Congress, the party that has ruled South Africa with the Communist Party going clear back to when the Afrikaners voted to surrender power in the early 90s. He was singing, we're going to shoot the boar. We're going to kill the boar. Now, the fake media says, don't believe your lying eyes. That doesn't really mean they're going to shoot the boar. That doesn't really mean they're going to kill the boar. It's exactly what it means. And if you look at these farm attacks, it is so horrific, you can't even put it into words. We're talking raping babies. We're talking drilling old women with electric drills and filling them with holes. We're talking about using blow torches to burn and torture people for hours on end. We're talking about dragging innocent people for miles behind a pickup truck along dirt roads. These are crimes that are so barbaric you can't even begin to imagine. And then what often happens afterward is they'll leave Bible pages on their dead bodies. They'll leave the family Bible on the desecrated bodies of these victims who've been tortured sometimes for days on end. That's not normal crime, regardless of what Ramaphosa and the fake media want you to think. These are targeted attacks aimed at exterminating this particular category of Christian agricultural person that is standing in the way of the revolution. And the South African revolutionaries were always very clear.
May I ask you a question about this?
Please.
A timely
Go
question,
ahead.
because today the Pope spoke about spreading Christianity throughout Africa. So does this put Black people at risk too if they adopt Christianity?
Of course it does. And that's one of the and again, this is not a racial issue. The media wants to racialize it so that people won't talk about it. The ANC was so brutal to everyone who opposed it, especially blacks, right? When the effort to stop the revolution was underway, it was actually the Zulus who allied with the Afrikaners. The Inkatha Freedom Party was one of the strongest forces in the Afrikaner coalition trying to prevent the Soviet-backed overthrow and revolution that was going to take over South Africa. But you didn't hear about that. And the punishments that they would mete out to people. Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela's wife, was on video saying we're going to liberate our country with matches and necklaces. Well, what does that mean? It's what they were doing, not just to the Zulus, but even to their own people that they suspected. They would put a tire filled with petrol around the necks of these people, set it on fire with a match, and it was one of the most gruesome deaths that a person could ever imagine. They were primarily using that against black people in South Africa who opposed their revolution. Now, granted, they were killing anybody that they could get their hands on. They were planting bombs at bars and shopping malls. They were planting mines on farm roads to kill farmers and farm workers alike. So they were very indiscriminate in their slaughter, but they were especially brutal to their black compatriots. You look at what they were doing in the Quatro torture camps up in Angola to blacks, right? So it's not a racial thing. It is an effort to eliminate this last little outpost of Western Christian civilization on the continent of Africa so that they can then pave the way to total tyranny. And again, it's a precursor of what they're planning to what's left of the Christian West if we don't wake up and if we don't call it out.
Can you draw some parallels to what you're seeing there currently and into the United States? I mean, obviously, you talk about some of these green policies, green energy policies and things like that, right? The effort by the United Nations and others to come in and basically steal your land, right? You will own nothing and you will be happy. We'll take your land because your carbon footprint is too much. But can you draw some more parallels and connections between what's happening in South Africa and what we can expect in the United States?
Sure. I would start by encouraging people to look at the narrative, right? I was still way too young to pay any attention to this, but if you go back to the 1980s into the early 1990s, Afrikaners were demonized by the entire world media as these savage, barbarian, white supremacist monsters who were just there to murder, kill, destroy, steal land, etc. Nothing could be further from the truth. Again, these are Christian people. They did inherit some elements of a bad system from the British Empire. You know, they fought the British Empire. They tried to keep their independent little republics there. They lost. You know, we won when we fought as Americans. They lost. They were absorbed into the British Empire. And so some of these oppressive race-based laws, which were on their way out, continued under Afrikaner rule. But the demonization campaign against the Afrikaners is almost exactly parallel to what we're seeing right now against the United States. If you look at the global media coverage, for example, just a recent one that people will remember of George Floyd, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. America was demonized in the entire world press as some sort of terrible, evil, racist society that was filled with crazy racist white cops running around murdering innocent black people with no repercussions at all. It's the exact same narrative we saw in South Africa. None of the extenuating circumstances were mentioned. None of that was talked about. It was all aimed at demonizing this particular group of people. That's the same thing that's happening around the world right now. America and by the way, a lot of Western Europe are being demonized as white supremacist, colonialist through the critical race theory lens. Same exact analytical tool that was used in South Africa to bring about this change. You look at the open border, right? Everybody heard terrible things about apartheid, which means separate development. Their thinking was, hey, there's a lot of nations here. We ought to try to give them self-government in their own homelands. Again, was it implemented well? Absolutely not. Their thinking was, hey, in Europe, Hungarians have Hungary, the Finnish people have Finland, the Swedes have Sweden. Why not have the Zulus have their own Zululand? Why not have the Swazi have Swaziland? Why not have the Tswana have Botswana? Why not have the Zoto people live in Lesotho and govern themselves, right? That was the thinking, at least. And what we saw, rather than an honest assessment of the failings of that, was a campaign of total slander, that everything they did was racist, etc. Same thing we're seeing right now with the demonization of the United States. And as all that demonization was going on against South Africa, what they didn't tell you was millions of Africans were flooding into South Africa. Why? Because as unsavory as the apartheid system may have been, that government, and this always shocks people to hear this, that government had the best human rights record of any government on the African continent. And if you don't believe me, find me one that breaks that rule, right? Look at the communist dictatorships, the barbarians that were ruling some of those other countries. So that's why they were flooding in there. And then what happened? The Afrikaner population became a smaller and smaller minority. The demonization campaign got more and more out of control. And eventually you ended up in a situation where the Afrikaners gave up political power, surrendered, and now they are, as Cyril Ramaphosa, the current president who was just in the Oval Office, explained, we're going to boil them slowly like frogs. That's what's happening now, is the boiling.
Well, I mean, we've spoken personally, Natalie and I both, to those who fled South Africa, white family, and would tell us the awful, awful violence that they incurred, just, pulling up to traffic lights, the, having their cars taken, shot in the head, stolen, awful,
They
awful
don't
things.
drive at night. Full stop. You just don't drive at night for any reason.
Grabbing husbands, forcing them to watch the rape of their wives in front of them by having their eyes held open by.
One friend said that when they pull up to the robot, which is what they call the stoplight, you tell your child, if someone comes near the door, near the car, get out of the car seat, get in mommy's lap, and we're going to run. And this is the way that they live.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard, I'm sure you've witnessed these stories when you live there. This is probably
never-ending amounts of them. That's right. It's just a normal part of life there.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's wild.
Alex, thank you so much. So your website, give us your website again so people can read that first.
Well, thank you guys very much. My personal website is libertysentinel.org. I also do a show for Unified TV. It's like Netflix, but where the stuff that Netflix won't carry because it's too controversial goes. So you can check out the Alex Newman Show on Unified, and then my personal website, libertysentinel.org, where I've got a lot of this information on South Africa.
And are there any other books from other sources that you would recommend our audience?